We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Israel Hamas agreed deal for release of Gaza hostages, multi-day truce. Starting time will be announced within next 24 hours. South Korea to suspend part of military pact after North claims a spy satellite launch. India all set to host the virtual G20 Summit on Wednesday. All G20 leaders, including the African Union chair, invited. Climate change and green energy in top focus. Rescue teams start horizontal drilling from entrance of Uttarakhand tunnel as rescue operations enter day 11. Indian Air Force flies specialist equipment. Sam Altman and OpenAI board open talks to negotiate his possible return. Microsoft discusses governance changes. Now, the big story we're tracking at DD India News the Israeli War Cabinet today voted supporting a deal to release some of roughly 240 Israeli hostages held by Hamas terrorists in Gaza in exchange for a multi-day truce, the starting time of which will be announced within the next 24 hours. As per the deal, 50 hostages, women and children, to be released over 4 days, during which there will be a pause in fighting. It said that for every additional 10 hostages released, the pause would be extended by another day. The Israeli government also approved a freeing of a greater number of Palestinian prisoners in Israel. It says the truce deal will also allow hundreds of trucks of humanitarian, medical and fuel aid to enter all parts of Gaza. Also, air traffic to stop daily for 6 hours in north of Gaza during 4-day ceasefire. Earlier, Qatar proposed a hostage deal following weeks of continuous negotiations on Tuesday. And Benjamin Netanyahu came down heavily on the rumors circulating regarding the end of war after the emergence of hostage release deal with Hamas. Netanyahu said the government of Israel is obligated to return home all of the hostages. He further said Israel will continue the war for complete elimination of Hamas and ensure that there will be no new threat to the state of Israel from Gaza.
יש בחוץ דיבורי הבל.
Outside, there is a lot of nonsense talk. After we cease for the release of the hostages, we will stop the war. So I would like to clarify, we are at war and we will continue to fight until we reach all our goals. In war, there are stages, and also in the returning of hostages, there are stages. But we will not let go until we reach the absolute victory and until we bring them all back.
Furthermore, Israeli military also claimed that it has pushed further into tunnel under Al-Shifa hospital complex. IDF also released image of what it says is a blast door that was breached. Video released on Sunday by the forces from a camera sent down the tunnel shaft, and a longer passageway had ended at the closed door. The army said it had not immediately gone through the door over concerns it could be a setup with traps. And India's Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar virtually addressed the extraordinary joint meeting of BRICS on Tuesday. Jaishankar welcomed all efforts of the international community towards de-escalation in Israel-Hamas conflict.
We welcome all efforts of the international community towards de-escalation. Right now, there is an urgent need to ensure that humanitarian aid and relief effectively and safely reach the population of Gaza. It is also imperative that all hostages are released.
And German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius made an unannounced visit to Kyiv on Tuesday, unveiling a new military aid package which will include an additional Iris-T air defence system. His visit coincided with the 10th anniversary of the Euromaidan protest and came a day after US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin travelled to Ukraine and pledged American support for the long haul. Megumi Lim has more from Kyiv.
German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius' surprise visit came a day after US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin traveled to Kyiv and announced $100 million in assistance to Ukraine. This was Pistorius' second visit to the capital since he took on the role of defense minister. He held talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and with his counterpart Rustem Umerov, and he announced a military aid package worth 1.3 billion euros, which will include an additional Iris-T air defense system. His visit coincided with the 10th anniversary of the Euromaidan protest, a movement that was sparked 10 years ago calling for Ukraine's future in the EU and the ousting of the pro-Russian government. Pistorius, during his visit, went to a protest memorial and laid down flowers in commemoration of those who were killed in the revolution. Berlin is the second biggest supplier of military aid to Ukraine after the United States, and the German government has said it will continue to support Ukraine for as long as necessary. Megumi Lim in Kiev reporting for DD India.
Moreover, Russian missiles on Tuesday hit port infrastructure and administrative buildings in Ukraine's southern Odessa region, according to the Ukrainian military. Russia used X-31 missiles, the Southern Military Command added. Odessa Governor Oleg Kuiper said port infrastructure had been struck, but no injuries were reported. Russia stepped up its attacks on port infrastructure on the Danube River and the Black Sea in southern Ukraine after it withdrew from a UN broker deal that guaranteed safe shipments of Ukrainian grain. Also, Ukrainian officials said on Tuesday that Russia's military is committing few troops and less equipment into the battle for the eastern Ukrainian town of Avdiivka, seen as a gateway to the capital city of Donetsk region. Ukrainian military spokesperson Alexander Stupan said there were few ground assaults and fewer airstrikes on Avdiivka. The Russian Defence Ministry's latest update mentioned that as troops were attacking villages south of Avdiivka, Ukraine's eastern regions remain the focus of Russia's slow advance in nearly 21 months of war after Moscow's troops failed to move on the capital Kyiv in the days following the invasion. And the United Nations World Food Programme warned on Tuesday that Ukraine may fail to meet future domestic and export wheat demand if Black Sea export routes remain blocked and attacks on food infrastructure continue. WFP's Ukraine director, Matthew Hollingworth, said a forthcoming report by the UN Human Rights Office would show that since mid-July, there have been 31 documented attacks on Ukraine's grain production and export facilities. Russia's UN ambassador, Vasily Nebenzia, told the Security Council on Tuesday that Moscow targets military infrastructure, not the civilian infrastructure. The United Nations has blamed Russia's February 2022 invasion of Ukraine for worsening global food crisis. Also, the White House on Tuesday said Iran may be considering providing Russia with ballistic missiles for use in Ukraine. White House spokesman John Kirby said the United States would monitor the situation between Iran and Russia and take appropriate action as needed. John Kirby noted that Iran had been providing Russia with drones, guided aerial bombs and artillery ammunition that Moscow has used to attack Ukraine. In return for that support, he said Russia had been offering Tehran unprecedented defense cooperation, including missiles, electronics and air defense. White House spokesman John Kirby also said that the Wagner mercenary group at Russia's direction was preparing to provide air defense capabilities to either Hezbollah or Iran. The United States was prepared to use its counter-terrorism sanctions authorities against Russian individuals or entities that might make these destabilizing transfers, he said. And footage filmed in Russia shows several groups of people walking towards Russian-Finnish border. The video shows people also using bicycles to cross the border. Over 500 asylum seekers have entered Finland in the last 2 weeks, most of whom are from Iran, Yemen, Somalia and Syria. Finland said on Monday it had become impossible to return asylum seekers who did not meet the criteria for protection. On Saturday, Finland ordered the closure of 4 border crossings with Russia as the government sought to stem an influx of asylum seekers. The government has accused Moscow of sending migrants to the crossings to retaliate for its decision to boost defense cooperation with the US, an allegation Russia has denied. Well, shifting focus, South Korea has suspended part of a 2018 military agreement with North Korea after Pyongyang defied warnings from US and its allies and launched a spy satellite. South Korea will resume surveillance flights near its border with North Korea once the suspension comes into effect today at 1 p.m. GMT. The pact aimed at de-escalating tensions in the Korean peninsula through establishment of buffer and a no-fly zone. North Korea said it placed a spy satellite in orbit on Tuesday and vowed to launch more in the near future. Meanwhile, US military was still assessing whether the launch was successful.
Korean leader Kim Jong-un is here.
Also, the North Korean satellite launch comes after the country's leader, Kim Jong-un, visited Russia, where President Vladimir Putin promised to help Pyongyang build satellites.
Until mutual trust is restored between North and South Korea, we plan to pursue the partial suspension of the effectiveness of the 9.19 military agreement. This is a necessary measure and the minimum defense action required for our national security. Furthermore, it is a justifiable measure in accordance with our laws.
A North Korea satellite launch has been met with condemnation from neighboring nations, international organizations and the US. Alerts were sounded across Japan as North Korea prepared for launch. Japanese PM Fumio Kishida said that at least one North Korean missile flew over the Japanese island of Okinawa.
Even if the purpose is to launch a satellite using ballistic missile technology is a clear violation of the relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions, it is also a very serious matter that greatly concerns the safety of our people.
Well, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has strongly condemned North Korea for using ballistic missile technology for the launch. In a statement, Guterres also called on North Korea to fully comply with UN resolutions and to return to dialogue. U.S. nuclear-powered submarine SSN Santa Fe has arrived at a port in the South Korean island of Jeju hours after North Korea launched the satellite. The move is seen as a deterrence to growing military threats from North Korea. Well, moving on, the United Nations General Assembly has officially adopted the Olympic truce resolution leading up to the 2024 Olympic Summer Games in Paris on Tuesday. Out of 120 UN member states, 118 votes were in favor, while there were 2 abstentions, including Russia and Syria. Thomas Bach, the International Olympic Committee's president, defended the ban on the Russian Olympic Committee, stating that athletes should not be punished for the government's actions. A decision on whether Russian athletes will be allowed to take part in the Paris Olympics as neutrals is yet to be taken. The UNGA has urged the nations to uphold the ancient Greek tradition of global peace before, during and after the Games. The Paris Olympiad will be held from the 26th of July to 11th of August 2024.
One of the aspects of non-discrimination is that athletes cannot be held responsible for the actions of their governments or their national Olympic committees. All athletes who are qualified on the field of play and are abiding by the rules of the Olympic Charter must have an opportunity to participate in international competitions.
Also, the United States has carried out 2 series of strikes against Iran-backed militias in Iraq. Notably, this is the first publicly reported U.S. response in Iraq to recent attacks against American troops in the region. The air raids come a day after U.S. forces were attacked at an airbase near Baghdad. Earlier this month, U.S. carried out a series of strikes in Syria targeting Iran's Revolutionary Guards facilities. Tensions have been mounting between U.S. and Iran over Washington's support to Israel in its war against Hamas. And in news from around the world, Pakistani police have conducted door-to-door searches in refugee settlements in Karachi, where hundreds of thousands of Afghans live, following the announcement of over 1 million undocumented refugees by Islamabad. Pakistan's UN High Commission for Refugees has reported targeted attacks on over 370,000 Afghan refugees. Spanish police have detained 3 individuals in an anti-terror investigation into the shooting of former head of Spain's Conservative People's Party in Catalonia, Alejo Vidal Quadras, on a Madrid street. The suspects were arrested in Malaga and Granada, with police investigating potential links with foreign countries. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Voters in Netherlands to elect a new Prime Minister today. Stay with us to know the latest from the North European nation. An Indian government is organizing a walkathon to promote the handloom sari culture. Croatia qualify for Euro 2024. France rally for a draw against Greece.
India that invents. India that innovates. India that excites. India that invites. Land of possibility. Teeming with opportunities. Watch India Ideas each Thursday, 8 p.m. only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Vipakshi Khurana. And moving on, voters in the Netherlands go to the polls today in an election that will bring the country its first new Prime Minister in more than a decade and determine how conservative the new cabinet may be. DD India correspondent Ross Cullen reports for more.
Since 2010, Mark Rutte has been the Dutch Prime Minister after steering his party through 4 general elections. But for the first time in 13 years, voters in the Netherlands will have a new premier. Rutte's centre-right government collapsed in July over differences in how to reduce the flow of asylum seekers entering the country. He is the Netherlands' longest-serving Prime Minister, but he has lost popularity and he promised not to stand again. The election campaign centred on 3 main issues: immigration, the cost of living and also climate change. Crucial social issues for voters include a housing shortage, failures in the healthcare system and the growing gap between rich and poor. A majority of voters support right-leaning parties, but no one party is on track to take more than 20% of the vote. That means that, as is usual after a Dutch election, difficult coalition talks and compromises lie ahead for the political parties. In Paris, Ross Cullen reporting for DD India.
Moving on, Sam Altman and ChatGPT interim CEO Amit Shah have opened negotiations aimed at possibly reinstating the ousted CEO, and co-founder Microsoft is discussing a list of governance changes it plans to request from OpenAI's board. Discussions are happening in order to improve the board itself. Microsoft is the artificial intelligence startup's biggest investor. Microsoft, which offered to hire Altman, has said it is amenable to him returning to the ChatGPT maker as long as certain criteria are met. The changes Microsoft is pushing for includes OpenAI to increase the size of the board and boost the experience level required for the members. Microsoft's deal with the artificial intelligence firm already required the startup's board to seek Microsoft approval for a merger, something which didn't occur this past weekend when the OpenAI board sought to merge with the rival artificial intelligence startup Anthropic. And moving on, the BRICS group convened a virtual summit on the Gaza conflict with several other nations joining. The joint statement called for the release of captive civilians and a humanitarian truce, but the statement obscured differences among the positions of the BRICS members. Here are 5 key takeaways from the world leaders' meeting. Okay, let's take a look at 5 big takeaways now from the meeting. BRICS countries discuss Gaza conflict, do not agree on joint declaration. India calls for restraint and presses on resolving Gaza conflict with dialogue and diplomacy. Russia calls for political solution to Israeli-Palestine conflict, says BRICS could take part in it. China says BRICS voice for justice and peace on Palestinian-Israeli issues very timely and important. Saudi Arabia demands the start of a serious and comprehensive peace process. And curtains are coming down on India's G20 presidency at the end of the month before it passes on to Brazil. A virtual summit of the G20 leaders is being held on Wednesday. On the call given by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, invitations have been extended to all G20 leaders and the African Union chair. The goal is to follow up on all action which was agreed in the Delhi Declaration in the September summit, with focus on climate change and green energy.
A virtual G20 leaders summit chaired by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be held on Wednesday. The summit was announced by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi during the closing session of the New Delhi G20 Summit in September 2023.
The Leaders Summit will be held tomorrow from 5:30 p.m. onwards under the chairmanship of the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. All of you are aware that the 18th G20 Leaders Summit was held in New Delhi successfully on 9th and 10th September 2023. It saw the unanimous adoption of the G20 New Delhi Leaders Declaration.
Throughout the G20 presidency, India has worked to ensure that the concerns of the Global South receive due cognizance. African Union has been included as a permanent member of G20. It may be recalled that the New Delhi G20 Summit witnessed the unanimous adoption of the G20 New Delhi Leaders Declaration. The virtual summit will take forward key select outcomes or action points from the New Delhi Summit, as well as review developments since then. The virtual G20 Summit is also expected to push for effective implementation of various G20 decisions, including through relevant national and international platforms.
Throughout the G20 presidency, India has worked to ensure that the concerns of Global South receive due cognizance. We've also seen the inclusion of African Union as a permanent member of G20. And the virtual summit will provide an opportunity not only to discuss the implementation of the Leaders' Declaration, but also for the leaders to share views and enhance cooperation on critical challenges that we confront and address gaps in global governance, reaffirm our existing commitment towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and move towards a reinvigorated multilateral system that is better positioned to positively impact people's lives.
India holds the G20 presidency until 30th November 2023. The G20 troika during the Brazilian G20 presidency in 2024 will comprise India, Brazil and South Africa. Amritpal Singh's report for DD India.
An Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar addressed the second CII India Nordic Baltic Business Conclave in New Delhi. He said that from India's perspective, the conclave represents an expanding footprint. He added that the event is also a reflection of a globalized era.
This conclave is significant because it reflects the growing awareness of our two regions about the possibilities and opportunities in cooperation. This certainly speaks of a more globalized era, but from India's perspective, also of an expanding footprint. The Baltic Sea and the Arctic region have re-emerged in strategic prominence, and conversations about future connectivity and logistics have business implications as well.
And the third Spain-India Forum kicked off in national capital New Delhi today. During the inaugural session, launch of Spain-India Observatory also took place. Addressing the event, Secretary Ministry of External Affairs Sanjay Verma said that within a decade or soon, every third or second youth out of 10 in the international workforce will be an Indian.
India is changing significantly. Our demographic profile, the average age being around 30, is also fulfilling both the demand and the supply side of the economic equation, not just for ourselves, but for the world. And I want to stress this point. For example, the demographic deficit, which will visit several parts of the world, particularly Europe. It's there where Indians can come in, because our youthful population, aspirational, better equipped, better skilled, interculturally more comfortable, linguistically gifted, and in that context, the Spanish language becomes important.
And now an update on rescue operations which are underway on a war footing for the 11th day in the collapsed Silkyara tunnel in Indian state of Uttarakhand to safely evacuate the 41 trapped workers. The Indian Air Force has joined the rescue operations with special equipments flown from Rourkela and Bengaluru to the rescue site. The Railway Vikas Nigam Limited is also transporting machinery for micro-tunnelling. On Tuesday, a major breakthrough was achieved when video communication was established and authorities are delivering essentials, food and medicines through a dedicated 6-inch compressor pipeline to the trapped workers. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. Extending Indian Prime Minister's nationwide initiative of Viksit Bharat, Punjab Governor launches the Viksit Bharat Yatra in the state. The nationwide outreach initiative has now entered a new phase with its nationwide launch. Designed for comprehensive development, the initiative underscores Indian government's dedication towards ensuring that the benefits of government schemes reaches to every citizen. Indian Ministry of Textiles launched an e-registration portal for the Sari Walkathon in New Delhi on Tuesday. The portal aims to promote the handloom sari culture of India. Nearly 10,000 women are expected to join this celebration from various states of India to showcase their ways of draping saris and presenting India as a country having unity in diversity. You're watching DD India Live. Time now for some sports news. In football, Croatia became the final team to automatically secure the place at Euro 2024 with victory over Armenia with Borna Sosa's sole goal of the match. The result means they finished second behind Turkey in Group D and sent Wales into the playoffs. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India Live. Well, let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.